Ladies and gentlemen, hope this finds you well. Hope y'all are doing fantastic today. We have fellow podcaster Joshua Rhodes on the show today. He started the Rhodes To Wealth podcast, a platform set out to provide wealth building advice, tips, and strategies from the world's most successful wealth building experts. He also sells cybersecurity solutions, which is relevant because we're going to talk about sales as well. This episode is packed with goodness. We're talking about wealth building, investing, networking, sales. So much good stuff in this episode. Before we get into it, though, a short disclaimer. The content in this episode is for informational purposes only. You should not construe any such information or other material as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. Disclaimer out. All right, with that said, here's Joshua Rhodes for y'all. Addicted to Learning, episode 8. We have Joshua Rhodes in the house today. Josh, how you doing?
I'm doing well, brother. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks. And, we're just earlier, prior to hitting record, we were just talking about, podcasting and, networking and how you can, really leverage your podcast to get in touch with some really, higher level people. And do you maybe want to start off by walking us through your, podcast, like what is it called? Like how do you go about booking guests basically, and how do you structure this whole, outreach?
Totally. Yeah. So I think I want to start by saying I do not have, or starting my podcast, I did not have, 40,000 connections. I didn't have a network of strong sort of speakers or anything of that nature. I, as a first generation graduate, I started a podcast because I had a need, right? Like I needed to learn. And rather than opening books or jumping into other podcasts or trying to learn from someone else's questions, I took it upon myself and I started connecting with experts in different industries, different people that have built wealth in a variety of ways. And I was hitting them on their websites and on LinkedIn and on email and just leaving no stone unturned, right? And writing very targeted messages. And I got 3, 4, 5 responses, and I took a step back and said, maybe I'm onto something here as far as the response rate. And instead of just talking to these guys by myself, maybe I should start recording this. And so I turned it into a podcast. And I take this a step further in that when I started the initial outreach, I had a hit list of 50 people I wanted to bring on the podcast, sort of the top 50 wealth experts. Right. And from there, I went down my list. I landed, let's call it 20, 30% of those people. And when I was able to bring them on, I crushed the interview. Right. I did lots of research. When I came on, I was very well prepared. I was using their quotes. I was using their books. Just very educated, very targeted. They came and they left knowing this guy's the real deal. And when I followed up on the podcast with, hey, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for doing this. It's great to meet you. I had such a good time in this interview. I would like to stay in this vertical. Do you have anybody in your network that you could introduce me to or possibly pull into the circle here? And let's see if that makes sense. Maybe I should continue to interview people in this avenue. 80, 90% of the time, they're willing to spin up another invite or another interview or at least an introduction for me, right? And so the initial outreach was very cold. It was very targeted. It was very time consuming. From there, it is slowly expanded and rolled out to where now, as you know, I'm booked through the end of the year with podcasts, and it's very little cold outreach. At this point, people are reaching out, people are making introductions, and it's really grown legs.
Yeah. And I'm really impressed with what you've built up from scratch, essentially.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
And like it's been like what, half a year or something? It's crazy.
Yeah. So I started recording, to be totally transparent. I started recording in early December, but I went live. The podcast went live in March. The reason I did that is when I decided I wanted to start a podcast, I read this book by Dory Clark. It's called Entrepreneurial You. And in there, is written several years back. And in that book, there's a chapter dedicated to podcasting. And she talks about how there's an ungodly number of podcasts out there. I think it's over 900,000 today. But over half of them never make it to episode 16, right? They die off before they get to episode 16, and people just get overwhelmed with the editing and the outreach and the content and the research. And so I made it a goal that I was going to get over 16 episodes recorded before I ever went live, right? I'm not going to fall in the bottom 15%. And so by the time I showed up in March and I pushed play and I started going live and the public could listen to my podcast, I had almost 50 recorded. So I got way ahead of the game. I was almost a year out, ready to go. That way, as new problems and hurdles and questions and opportunities surface, I have the bandwidth to go get those versus spending every week trying to grind out, I have to record an episode this week or I'm going to fall behind. Right? I'm way out in advance now.
Which that's literally me. You're talking about.
Yeah, man, it's a grind, man. It's a grind.
Yeah. Oh man, like I wish I had recorded like, I don't know, a dozen or so episodes prior to launching, but now I'm definitely playing catch up, but I don't know, it is what it is. But if anyone out there's wanting to start a podcast, listen to Josh's advice, please.
I want to maybe plug this in because it's something to think about. It sounds really cool, right? Like, let's get everything pre-recorded. I think that the downside of this, and it's something I experienced, is some things that you talk about, depending on the subject that's at hand, some things are very time sensitive and time relevant, right? Like we're in the middle of the coronavirus. And so if we recorded this now and we were talking deep about COVID, and then you decided I need to hold on to this for, I have 50 podcasts recorded. I need to hold on to this for 50 weeks, and you're going to release this 50 weeks later. This topic, this conversation, the tips that I'm providing are probably not as fluid and not as solid as they would have been if you released them 2 weeks after the recording. So I bumped into that myself, recording stuff in November and me being very wealth specific. People talking about stock markets and when to invest in the housing market and what the interest rates are. There's all these things that they were one way in November, and by the time I launched in March, they were a little different. And in fact, there were 2 episodes I wasn't even able to release because of how different things were, right? So I think there's sort of a double-edged sword there. I'm knowing everything that I know now, I would still tell everybody to pre-record and get ahead of the game. But there is a sort of quote-unquote downside there to keep in mind as you ask your questions and you get started.
Yeah. And so you've had some bigger names on your podcast as well. Was there any difference as far as the outreach process, knowing you were gonna go for the bigger guys, so to speak, and gals, though it's mostly guys, to be honest? Or is it like you're hitting all of them the same way? Kind of like walk us through your sequence. And is it like, because I know we're going to talk about sales also, I know you have a sales background. Do we have sort of like, schedule like multiple emails, kind of like follow up, sometimes you had to maybe follow up. It's too many questions at once. Sorry. Man, just go ahead. Yeah.
The question's awesome. And to answer, I think I don't have a cookie cutter email, right, or a template that I could provide you, but I do think that all of my outreaches are very similar. You mentioned I've got a sales background. I started in the business development world where I was just cold calling people on the West Coast and writing cold emails. And I've went through lots of training and lots of courses and lots of classes and had bosses train on this. And so I do think this is something that I've improved on over the years and that I'm able to really leverage. And I think it's helped me here at getting my podcast started. But to answer your question, when I've decided, okay, I need to reach out to Neil Sahota, right? And he's the guy that helped build artificial intelligence or the IBM artificial intelligence engine that won Jeopardy for the first time. Right? He's the guy that built that. And so when I put him on my list, I said, okay, what books did he write? What blogs are he in? Where's he at? What projects is he working on? And I've done, let's call it 3 or 4 days of research. I completed his book. I went through blog posts and pulled my favorite quotes. And then my outreach to him, my email to him is probably 3 or 4 paragraphs long. It's hefty. It shows I know who you are. I'm reaching out with a very specific purpose. Here's the 3 or 4 things that I've really connected with you on, why I want to connect. And here's 2 or 3 topics I think we could talk about on my podcast. Now, if you're interested, let's book 15 minutes. Let me talk with you a little bit more, tell you my background, and we'll decide if this makes sense. Man, that email, if it's targeted enough, it's educated, it's not some spray and pray of like, I have a podcast, can you come on and be a guest, right? Like nobody's going to respond to that. But if you're reaching out, it's hyper targeted, it's hyper focused. They can tell you put time, you're a fan of theirs. They respond to that more than not. People want to help, right? They want to help in spurts. They don't want to become a mentor of yours and guide you for years, but they want to help in hour-long spurts. And most of the time, there's a good response there. I just want to add one other thing in that if they don't respond, I had Craig Kurloff, who invented the term house hacking. Right? I think he co-invented the term house hacking with bigger pockets. He's coming on the podcast Monday. I did a very cold outreach to him and said, my guests are asking for house hacking. You're the guy that invented house hacking. I've read your book twice. Here's exactly what's happened. Here's why I want to talk to you. Can you come on the podcast? He responded, said, I'd love to. And then he went dark for like 3 or 4 weeks. Wouldn't message me back, wouldn't email me back. I sent a very light, like, hey man, I feel like I'm starting to bother you here. If it's a bad time, whatever it is, let me know. We can shelf this. He came back, listen, I've been busy. I want to help you. I'm really excited. Put some time on my calendar and went for Monday. So I think the point I want to make is everything is hyper targeted. It's very focused. I'm giving lots of details around why I love them. And let's talk about them and what I want to talk about. And they see that I've done my research. There's no reason to not respond. The positive response rate, not a made up number, is north of 50%. More people respond than not.
Yeah. And let's talk about podcasting as a networking engine. This is something you brought up during our conversation the other day. Do you want to kind of maybe expand on that a little?
Yeah. So I think, I mentioned early on, I didn't start this podcast with a crazy network or anything of that. In fact, I don't think I mentioned, I'm a first generation graduate, right? So the first Rhodes to go to college and graduate. A couple months before I graduated, I went to college to be a coach, right? So I wanted to, I played college football. As you know, I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I know the impact a good leader, a good mentor can have on you. And I wanted to replicate that. A couple months before I graduate, my advisor says, Josh, you're top of the class right now. You don't want to go into coaching first, right? Like find a way to make some money and then fall back on this. So I take this sales role and I start to grind and I start to build a little bit of wealth and a little bit of disposable income. And I didn't know where to put my cash, what to do with the savings I had. And I started to get a bit overwhelmed, right? And my father couldn't help me. My immediate family that's never really built wealth or the idea of like passive income. No such thing for the Rhodes family before me. And so I was in totally uncharted waters with no network to help me out. And that's where this idea of podcasting came in. Is I met this guy, his name's Ben Kruger. He talks about cash flow podcasting. And he says, if you start a business and then you build a podcast for that business and you interview your prospects, you interview people that would be your perfect customer, they are more likely to become your customers. And I kind of took that to heart and said, I need to learn about wealth. I'm trying to learn, where do I put my money and do I put it in a savings account? How do I invest? What stocks? What is the stock market? Do I invest in real estate? When do I invest? Like all these questions. Reaching out to these experts and asking for a mentorship or just asking them a question, chances are you're not going to get a response. But if you have a podcast where you're saying, listen, I have a following and I'm going to pull you on. I've got great questions for you. I'm going to make you look like a champion. And not only that, but to my guests, to my followers, I'm going to funnel them to you. Very rarely do they ask how many followers you have, right? They're just excited about, this is a marketing opportunity and you're going to expand my brand and you're going to share my website. And I'm getting in front of 60, 70, maybe more thousands of customers in 1 hour. So it's a great opportunity for them as well. It's a long-winded way of, I think, if you're just getting started and it's, I need to build wealth, I need to learn how to code, I need to learn whatever it is, you can do a deep dive yourself. And in parallel, you can back up and say, I'm going to start a podcast around this and reach out to the experts in that field, asking for assistance and letting them know where you're at in your journey and why you need them. They are more willing to come on and share their story and give you guidance there on a podcast, right? So you're constantly expanding the folks, your network, how you reach. And maybe I cap with this. Episode 25, I just released episode 33. It actually goes live tomorrow. Episode 25, I sent out a sort of board of advisors or board of mentors update, right? So the first 25 people that I released episodes with. Hey guys, just want to give you a quick update. Over the last 25 weeks, I've interviewed all of you. I've released all of your podcasts. I've also taken Neville Medor's copywriting course, and I'm having these problems. And I want to interview these top 3 people that I can't get a hold of. And I'm constantly updating my network. Through those people, I've seen angel investing opportunities, job opportunities, networking like crazy. All these different things bubble up to be able to either help you or provide a bit of guidance for someone else, right? So it's only broadened and expanded my network, unlike anything else I've ever participated in.
That is fantastic, of course. But I think it's important to highlight also how much effort and work you've put in and you're putting in every day. And
Totally.
it's no walk in the park at all.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
But like with that said, I would like to maybe switch gears a little and talk about kind of like the biggest takeaways from your podcast guests so far. Just kind of like off the top of your head, what are like, if you had a couple of, nuggets, kind of like, tweetables, sort of like very memorable quotes or just takeaways where you're like, wow, okay, the one thing I remember is this. Just what comes to mind?
Yeah. So what I'm going to answer the question and then I want to back up, but what comes to mind is make it simple. That's the sort of the tweetable, if you will. Make it simple. I've interviewed, I mentioned probably 100 folks, a little over 100 people now, and they are all across the board. I've interviewed folks that have invested in real estate, interviewed folks that only do stock market, only buy trucks, only buy raw land, across the board, right? And so it's tough for me to say, put your money here, or here's the common theme between these folks. But one thing I've always heard is keep it simple, right? And I think if I'm going to expand a little bit more, that the most solid portfolio I've seen, and this has been echoed 5, 6, 7 times, and I can rattle off the names of the folks, but this is supported by Ramit Sethi and Dr. Brad Klontz and Carl Richards and Andrew Howe. I even heard Warren Buffett in his annual presentation a few months ago talk about this, is that you need to automate everything that you possibly can. Automate your 401k, automate your IRA, automate paying your bills off, automate everything you can. And then at the end of the month, any excess cash you have, funnel that into a brokerage account. All of your investments, 401k, IRA, brokerage account, all of that can go into a target retirement fund, and you're ahead of 90% of Americans. Keep it very simple.
Yeah. And geez, I feel like I'm blanking on what I was going to say next.
Welcome to the finance podcast, man. It's
Oh man. Oh yeah. I was gonna kind of like take what you just said and bring it back to like a very practical sort of level, which is not to say it wasn't, practical, but like on a very practical level, say I'm a millennial, maybe I'm a, Gen Xer. I'm just a young person. I have, some cash in the bank, not a lot, because I do need some, emergency savings, but like maybe have anywhere from like 10K to 100K that I want to invest. Obviously the first thing to do is to go check out your podcast, listen to all of your episodes.
Appreciate the plug. Yeah, thank you.
Exactly. Of course, of course. No, and then the second step is like to educate yourself on, basic finance, basic real estate, et cetera, et cetera. Where do I go from there as, like, I don't know, a 30-year-old, millennial with some money saved up?
Yeah, I think you've laid out a perfect roadmap. What I would suggest is, even if you listen to my podcast, the amount of money that I have saved, my goals, where I'm at, I'm 27 years old, right? 26 years old. Whoever's tuning in, we are totally different. We have different goals. We have different actions. We have different things we want out of this. Some of us have families. Some of us are solo. Some of us live in apartments. Some of us live in homes, right? So I think our situations are different, and it's really difficult to get exact guidance from someone you're tuning into without asking the questions. A couple things that I'm hearing as you're talking through this. The first thing, and you said this yourself, is make sure you have an emergency fund. That is so important. And what I've heard from, again, I'll shout out Dr. Brad Klontz and a handful of other certified financial planners and therapists that have come on the podcast, is you need to have roughly 6 months of expenses saved up in your emergency fund. And so if you've got that saved and you drop that into some sort of online savings account and you never look at it, you never invest it, you never touch it, that just sits off to the side. If you still have money left over and you're asking the question of where do I put this, my suggestion is put that in a target retirement fund. There are millions of investments that you could get into, right? And the point you made of you need to educate yourself and really learn the ropes before you invest is so important. And while you are learning the ropes and while you are learning about real estate, or you're learning about freelancing, or maybe you want to go buy big rig trucks and rent them out to companies or whatever that is, while you're learning about that avenue, you need to put your money in a target retirement fund and let that grow, right? I think immediately investing in, I like the idea of real estate. Let's go to real estate now and buying 13 homes. You're going to find yourself in a panic. You're going to get hit with all sorts of roadblocks. You don't know what you don't know, and you're going to uncover it all at once. And so I think it's extremely important to move slow, understand the ropes, have somebody that can help guide you through things, and just bite off little pieces, right? And in the meantime, like I said, to beat 90% of Americans, and that's the exact number Dr. Brad Klontz gave, to beat 90% of Americans, invest in a target retirement fund and get out of the way. And so my suggestion is build that emergency fund, put everything else in the target retirement fund, and then as you become more educated and as you learn about real estate, or you learn about self-storage, or you learn about railroad cars, you can pull out some money and have some quote unquote play money to use over there. But the bulk of your time, the bulk of your cash, the bulk of everything needs to be sitting in that brokerage account underneath that target retirement fund.
Yeah. Yeah. That is very sound advice right there. And then we obviously put in the intro that, this is not official legal or financial advice. We're no experts. This is all just, for, entertainment purposes, as they say.
Entertainment and what I'm doing and what I've heard, right? I'm by no means a certified financial planner. I've not taken those classes. I mentioned at the top, I started this because I was clueless. And so this is coming from other experts and what they've done and what they've told me. And now I'm sort of rinsing and repeating myself and just shining a mirror out for others to be able to use.
Yeah. I want to talk about sales for a bit here. You sell software for a living, quite successfully so.
Yeah.
And how do you organize yourself is maybe the first question. As a salesperson, do you stick to a very disciplined schedule? Are you very flexible? Will be one question. And then I would like to talk about basically the inner game of basically not just sales, but like success or life, because obviously we're dealing with a lot of setbacks in 2020 and how to talk about that. But yeah, please.
how do I organize myself? So
Yes.
I would say pre-podcast, I was even more routine driven. I'm a very routine driven guy.
Hmm.
I wake up at the same time. I
Hmm.
do not miss a class in the morning, right? I do the same breakfast. Like I'm very routine driven. Um, Saying that, when you pull in a side hustle, especially a podcast, uh, it really throws a wrench in things, right? And you're doing prep calls and you're doing recordings and you're doing post production and you're doing outreach. And so it definitely throws a wrinkle in things. I would say 80–90% of the time, I am that routine driven guy. I try to do my podcasts on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I have my calendar blocked off to where it's always in the afternoon. It's always after 11 o'clock. And I try to keep that very cookie cutter, right? And I've got a couple applications that allow the podcast guests to only book there.
Hmm.
On the sales side, I'm even more sort of time task driven, right? I'll block my calendar for 2 hours of prospecting this day. Calls are available this day. Very sort of use my calendar to create organization. But I think a short answer here is I've become far more flexible, not voluntarily, but because the podcast has driven me to do so.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's like, because sometimes you got to accommodate the guests, and like if they can only do, another day, then it's like you want to have that guest on the show anytime soon, or are you gonna like make some concessions there?
Man, I've done I interviewed Rob Cubbin. His podcast came out last Friday, and he dialed in from Taiwan. And so you have guys like that, right? Where actually I think you and I we're on opposite ends of the world, right? Like it's very, yeah, you've got to show flexibility. I've taken calls. I've done podcasts at 9–10 p.m. at night, right? To be able to play with them and catch it in their morning. So
Yeah.
it definitely throws a wrinkle in things, but man, I've found such a passion for it, and it keeps me alive. It keeps me alive.
Yeah, same here. Bring me so much joy, and it's like I get to like learn, for free, basically. I get to share my learnings, and then people even like this, as well. So it's
Dude,
like a triple win.
I can't get enough. Before I started a podcast, I was a podcast consumer myself. Like you said, books and audio books, and like I have at the bottom of my website, I'm a student to you all. And that's something I picked up from Tim Ferriss years back, and it stuck with me just because I truly take that to heart, right? Like the opportunity to learn and to be able to learn from someone that's been doing this as long as I've been alive. It's such a unique experience. And the fact that someone like, I mentioned Dory Clark, and I read her book to start the podcast. She charges, it's like $9,000 for a half-day business strategy session. It's $9,000. And then she sat down with me and my guests for 2 hours for free, right? Like it's such an incredible opportunity, and it's so humbling. And you almost feel like you have to go to an extreme in the preparation and the research. And she's giving you 2 hours of her time that she would charge thousands of dollars for on a business. It's an incredible journey.
Yeah. And it is so um it is so unexpected, the benefits you get. Like it's like a gift that keeps on giving.
Totally
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah, I don't know. We can, geek out
It,
on this.
I mean, it has a ripple effect, right? And I think I talked about this earlier, but you have a
That's what it is.
podcast, and you think I'm trying to grow I want to grow my viewership, and maybe I'll get some sponsors. And this is not a cash engine, right? It's not a cash cow.
Yeah.
You're not going to start printing dollar bills through a podcast, but it's a way to jump into hyper speed in personal growth and in networking. You're able to leave an impact on people that you would never be able to contact otherwise, and really, really impress them and influence them and have them introduce you to other folks in their network. And I mentioned I've seen job offers and angel investing opportunities, and I probably text 10 people that I've interviewed now. right? Like, so it's not this huge, I have all these mentors, but I'm now texting these high-end, these people I would have never known without a podcast, right? Like, there are tons of benefits from here, and it just continue. The more persistent and the deeper you get into the game, and the more people and the larger the audience, the more benefits you see from it. And so it just continues to build momentum as you push it down.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. Yeah, I am just thinking. Oh yeah, with the sales. Yes, I wanted to ask. I wanted to ask with the sales personally, because this is super interesting and difficult. You basically, I'm a freelancer. You're in sales. Basically, you eat what you kill.
That's
Basically,
right.
and that can be really challenging. So how do you deal with that? What's your approach?
I'm a savage, man. No, no, man, this is a God honest answer. I love it. I love the pressure. I love the idea. I mentioned I was a college athlete. There's something about, as a college athlete, when you perform or when you're practicing or when you're playing, if you perform well and you do good, you see results and you see rewards because of it. If you perform shitty, can I cuss? I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, if you don't perform well, it's less than, you're going to get benched, right? And even worse, in college, they will rip your scholarship from you, and you go from there to sales, where it's an enterprise sales role. I'm not strictly commission based or anything like that, but it is almost a perfect correlation to athletics, right? You come into a sales role, you've got to grind your ass off. You learn as much as you can. You take courses and you watch film, quote unquote, and you read scripts and you learn your pitch and you get really, really good at it. And those that fall behind, they get benched, or even worse, they get axed, right? Their scholarships pulled away. They're off the team. And then those that are successful, those that are crushing, those that work hard and they enjoy the grind and they like to be competitive. And if my name is second on the leaderboard, I will not pull up the website, right? Like I'm that nasty with it, and it's sickening. And it just drives me, man. Yesterday was end of quarter, and I was smiling from ear to ear. I just in those grind moments, it's I endure the grind. I love the grind, and it gets me going, man.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, a copywriting course you're taking right now.
That's
and basically we originally connected on the Trends Facebook group, which is, by the way, to all of you listeners, the best Facebook group there is, period. You should all get on that ASAP.
It is insane. I talk about it every podcast episode that I have. I mean, you just pick one and tune in, and I mention Trends in it. It's fantastic.
It's just so good. And, if you know anything about, Trends and, the founder, Sam Parr, they're all about, great copywriting. And this is how I was like, oh, he keeps mentioning everywhere he goes, he keeps mentioning, guys, you got to learn copywriting. Copywriting is the number one skill. Copywriting is how you make money. And I'm like, he keeps saying it like over and over. And I'm like, okay, it's finally, time for me to sit down. So what are some resources you can recommend?
Funny enough, I interviewed Sam Parr. I had him on the podcast and asked him this. Is like, your content is outrageous. It is the best. And I make time in my day. I mentioned routine driven. I make time in my day to read the Hustle Trends newsletters. Yeah. I'll get caught just scrolling through their
Facebook here
group.
Yeah,
it's outrageous, man. Yeah. I had him on the podcast and asked him about, I'm getting ready to start my own blog and what do I need to do and what's some important factors. And as you can imagine, he brought up copywriting and said, nobody's going to tune in if you're not writing good, solid. It's got to be A+ content. And the only way to get there is to take a copywriting course. He put me on Neville Medora's copywriting course. Originally, that was spelled with 2 Ks, copywriting course. he just got the domain changed. I think he bought the domain to where now he's got 2 C's. So it's actually spelt copywriting course correctly. And it is unparalleled. It is fantastic, man. It's really, really good. He breaks down different types of writing styles and where to write, how to write emails, how to write online, how to write on websites. It's incredible. Not only that, but he's got these office hours that he offers up. And it's like every other Thursday, I believe. Maybe it's every 3 Thursdays. And if you submit, like I was working on a PDF or a graphic I wanted to send to my listeners. So I built this graphic and then I submitted it. And then in office hours, he's got 10, 12 folks that show up, including me, and we jump on just like you and I are doing on a Zoom. And then he reviewed and wrote the PDF for me. He writes prospecting emails. He writes websites. The man is legit. And I don't remember how much I paid for it. It's probably $500, maybe a little less than that. And it was every dollar worth it. It is lights out.
Yeah.
By the way, just maybe a small plug, but I'm wrapping up. I've finished his entire hardcore course. I'm now participating in his office hours, and I'm trying to get copy course certified. I'm taking some of the fun little bottom ones here. And I told him, once I get the certification, you got to come on the podcast. So I'm going to try to dive into this deeper, but me having no connection to the program and no affiliates and not even talking to Neville outside of office hours, I cannot suggest it enough, man. It is lights out.
Yeah. Sweet. And we'll link it below in the show notes, of course, as well as, again, obviously your podcast, Rhodes To Wealth. Anything else, like, getting ready to wrap up here. Is there anything else you want to, maybe plug or mention, or some final thoughts?
No, man. I think you've done a good job. I really, really appreciate you giving me the opportunity. And you did your homework. You hit me with a few emails before this and made my job much easier. So thank you very much. I think as far as plugs, you mentioned the only place I would point is to rhodestowealth.com. We talked about the ripple effect. You can type in rhodestowealth.com. You find all the transcripts and podcasts and blog posts and all that good stuff. I interviewed Josh Reason. He's a domain expert. He recently gave me wealthinterviews.com. Right. And so now if you type in wealthinterviews.com, that goes directly to my website.
Nice.
Just another point of, this thing is gaining momentum. You continue to build right on this podcasting, this network, and there's lots of benefits that come from it. Really, really appreciate the time, man. This was awesome.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much again for coming on, and I'll catch you soon.
Cool. Cheers.
Thanks, man. Bye.